Welcome to another conversation. Christine and I today are going to be diving into multidimensional healing through the chakras, which is a topic we are both incredibly passionate about and very excited to be sharing. And our hope for today is that through this conversation, you're going to get a little bit of a deeper dive into how we can use our chakras not just as, energy centers that sit along our spine, but really these lenses through which we can see many, many different levels of our well-being, and how the chakras offer a lens through which we can see how to balance and heal our psychological health, our emotional health, our energetic, and even our physical health. And so this is just going to be a little taste of something that our Soul Rising students are also receiving this week. You'll notice in the coming weeks that we are basing our podcast topics off of similar things that the Soul Rising students are learning in our signature Shamanic Reiki course. So there goes my video. So if you're interested in these topics that we're going to be sharing over the next 4 months, know that they are just, again, those little tastes, those little tips of the iceberg of what you get in the Soul Rising Shamanic Reiki class. If you want to learn more about that, feel free to give us a message. But I know that we are so excited to dive into multidimensional healing through the chakras. So I'm curious, Christine, do you want to kick us off today?
Yes, I love it. So I think how I want to start is let's just give you the basic anatomy of what chakras are, what are the chakras, and then we can really dive into the metaphysical side of things, because I feel like there is a lot of information on the chakras. Like there's no doubt, like you can Google it, you can go into a bookstore and anywhere in the country and find a book on chakras. Like they're very well known at this point in our Western world. And sometimes it feels very surface level of the understanding. So we want to be able to invite you to take it just a little bit deeper of that understanding, knowing too that we are really just giving you the tip of the iceberg, because there really is so much. Like I feel like my first signature program that I ever offered was called Chakra Mastermind. Why? Because I felt like this was something that really needed to be investigated, appreciated, and developed as part of your spiritual practice in life, because it is the roadmap to healing your body, mind, and spirit. And so I get very excited, just as Isabel does, when we talk about this topic, because it really can illuminate where your healing needs to focus, right? And so we have the 7 primary chakras in our body. And yes, they do align along the spine, but they also are connected with a nerve plexi in our physical bodies, right? So our heart, it's a nervous plexi. Our throat, there's our thyroid, it's a nervous plexi. I think people forget that there's actually a true physical neurological connection to these energy centers. And so we have to recognize there is this physical electromagnetic energy that's being emitted from these energy centers. And that's why you see it across traditions and across cultures. This isn't something that you find just in India. It's just where the most has been written in Sanskrit on this topic, right? And so, but you can go to the Amazon, you can go to different Native American, you can go lots of different indigenous cultures recognize that we have these energy centers in the body. Why? Because when you are clairvoyant, when you are in someone's energy, you can feel it, you can feel them. And so are you feeling the electromagnetic pulse? Are you feeling the energy? Are you feeling the spirit senses? All of it's in the realm of possibility. And so we need to give validation to yeah, this is actually a real thing. And one, we can understand it from a physical component. We have the physical health, we have the emotional health, and we have our spiritual health. That's all intertwined on how these really can come into an expansive energy state or a contracted energy state. And so that's really the basic understanding of what a chakra is. What do you have to add to that, Isabel?
Well, and I think what's so fascinating about it is, you mentioned all the different traditions that we see the chakras come in. And, even in Buddhism, there's a lot of mentions of chakras in certain Buddhist traditions as well. And what I find fascinating is that the actual number of the chakras varies, the descriptions of them vary, right? Like there are these variations, but what we've come to see in the Western modern world is kind of the standardized version of the chakras, right? Are those 7 chakras that are along your spine. And like Christine said, what's fascinating about those is that we can actually see now on an anatomical level that there are nervous system bundles at each and every chakra point. It's not like 1 or 2 of them, it's every single chakra point. There is a main nervous plexi. And what is really interesting about this is that in a lot of traditions, when we look at the chakras, they were also ascribed to having these physical characteristics of this chakra controls this organ or this physiological function. And what's fascinating when we're looking at those nervous system plexi is that those nerves innervate those organs that the chakra was said, thousands and thousands of years ago to contribute to. And so there's starting to be this matchup between the science and the medicine of what's happening in our physical bodies. There's
There you
this
go.
mashup in science and spirituality now that's happening where we can see that the nervous system lines up with the chakras in these bundles. But then there's also this secondary field of research that's happening right now that is suggesting that there's a lot of similarities between the meridians from traditional Chinese medicine and the nervous system. And when you map the two out on top of each other, there's actually a lot of similarities in the way that they flow and what they innervate and what they control. And so we're starting to get to this point where science is able to back up these spiritual experiences that we're having. But what's fascinating about this is that, again, if we look at the chakras, we suddenly have 3 different ways that we can really conceptualize what the chakras are. We have the spiritual concept of the chakras, which is, what we were taught from the Sanskrit and in the Buddhist traditions and through the indigenous cultures, and these spiritual perspectives of these energy centers that are swirling along our spine that have this dual energy flow, right? We can move energy from root, which is our first chakra, up to crown, or we can move energy from crown down to root. And that dual energy flow is, a metaphor for that duality of life, but it's important to have that flow as that reminder that we are a human being in root chakra having a spiritual experience in crown chakra. And as that energy flows, if one chakra is imbalanced, if it's not spinning correctly or flowing correctly, then the rest of our energy flow is going to become imbalanced. And so we have this very spiritual perspective of the chakras, but then we have this secondary explanation for them, which is this physical aspect of these nerve bundles, these nerve plexi that we have in our body that are quite literally electrical hubs in our body. And so where spirituality says energy, a lot of times science uses electricity, right? Or waves or frequency or things. And so we have these centers of electrical power in our body where these nerve bundles are that happen to innervate specific organs at each level of the body. And so suddenly we have this idea of, oh, okay, the thyroid actually is the chakra and the heart and the lungs are with the heart chakra. And so we can start to see this physical aspect, but then we get to add on this additional layer of adding in the metaphor and the ability to almost psychoanalyze in a way what's happening when we put together this spiritual perspective and this medical perspective of, well, what does the throat symbolize, right? Throat is our ability to communicate. It's our ability to speak our truth. We have our solar plexus, which is one of the largest nerve bundles, and it's that center of personal power. It's where it innervates our digestive organs and our stomach to be able to stomach life, to have that sense of personal power, right? When we see, in cartoons, a character who's really like full of himself, they always have their chest and their stomachs out because it's just the center of power that we have in our physical bodies. And so we can start to look at what's the metaphor for that. What does that say about our psychological and emotional well-being as well? And suddenly we have this really beautiful and complete blueprint of what needs healed, what needs balanced, what needs to be brought into alignment, and how can we use the chakras to understand that? And so it becomes a lot less, is my root flowing? And a lot more, oh, I was on a walk today and I tripped and fell, and the only thing that got hurt was my right big toe. Why? What does the right big toe symbolize? It's on the right, so it's a very masculine energy. It's very far down in the body, so it's obviously root chakra. But what is it about that particular area of my body or my energy that had a weakness there? And I think that's something that I don't think gets brought to the table a lot when we talk about chakras is that, yes, they function individually, but when they come together, it forms our entire energetic field. They form our entire energetic body and they extend out beyond the body. So, what we know of as our aura is actually being fed by the chakras. And so, when we think about things like limiting beliefs or physical ailments or mental illness symptoms like anxiety or depression or anything, even that spiritual apathy that I think we all feel sometimes of just not caring about anything, feeling disconnected from a higher power, all of these signs and symptoms are actually just expressions of something in our energetic field that has caused a weakness there. And the example that I always love to give to our students to highlight this is, imagine that two people fall down the stairs, right? And one of them breaks their hip and one of them breaks their elbow. Why? Well, they both had equal potential to break everything in their body. Why were those the things on each person that suffered? And what's the metaphor there? What's the meaning of that? Why is that where the weakness in their energy body was, knowing that everything in this physical reality is based on that energetic framework? And so if we're experiencing something in the physical, like our nervous plexi or our nervous system is just constantly in a state of fight or flight, what have you, that means that there's something deeper on an energetic level. And that's where we can start to connect to the chakras and say, okay, well, hip is sacral or root chakra. And how have I been feeling about my security or my creativity? And it starts to create this bigger roadmap. But until we start to be willing to look at the chakras, not just as individual energy centers, but an entire system and an entire being, in a way, an entire aspect of our being, there's a level of that understanding that's always going to be cut off because we're wanting to, as our minds do, kind of trim things down into these bite-sized pieces. But the chakras are so much more than, root chakra is red and sacral chakra is orange. It's so much more than that. And when we can open up that perspective, that roadmap to healing that you were talking about really can reveal itself.
I feel like there's definitely a, part of our culture, part of our, our society really likes to like really break things down and make things simplified and mechanical, right? Like our Western healthcare system is very mechanical. Like we're going to work on just the heart, but the heart has nothing to do with adrenal glands or your neurological functioning. Like we live in a culture and a society that really likes to separate. And so when we come to the table and we have this conversation about the chakras, oftentimes in the books, they make it very black and white. And I find it really fascinating when there is this overlap. When you look at it from different cultural perspectives of these energy centers, where's the commonalities and where are they contrast? Why? Because those energy centers do overlap. They're affecting the flow of each one another. And so when we start looking at energy as more of a light spectrum or a wave or as a toroidal flow of how is it moving and expanding within its own system and affecting that flow of others. So if you have one, let's say that you just lost someone in your life, there's been a great tragedy, right? And you're heartbroken. Like you can feel the heartache, you can feel the grief overwhelm you. And how does that affect your throat? Right? We all know this, like when we are in the process of grieving, that we get choked up. we literally have a hard time speaking it because our heart is locked down and it's not in that flow. And so when we can start seeing our energetic bodies as a flow into one another, when we can think of it all systematically rather than here's my root chakra, this is what it means, and therefore X, Y, and Z. We live in a society that really wants those black and white answers. And this is where I get pretty frustrated online when I see these conversations of like, it belongs to crown. Like, where does the pineal gland belong to? Is it third eye or crown chakra? And I'm like, oh my God, you people. Like, it just is really frustrating because you know what? It affects both. And that's not a wrong answer. Like, it can affect both. And when we can start leaning into, yes, we have this beautiful roadmap of healing through the basics of the chakras, but when one is feeling really contracted, the next one nearby, it can't be in its full expansion, right? It doesn't work that way. And so when we look at the system, it's not uncommon for me to do a chakra analysis or having one of our other practitioners do a chakra analysis and recognize, wow, there's a lot of imbalances going on and they're affecting one another, right? It doesn't mean that they're completely 100% blocked, because that means that life wouldn't exist there. It would be completely shut down and dead. That's not happening. There's some type of flow, there's some type of pressure that is keeping things moving along, and it's not optimal, right? So when we have this conversation around the chakras, I want to invite you to come into a more expanded mind space of going, how am I in flow and where am I out of flow, and these emotional attributes of the chakras.
And knowing that, like you said, the flow of our energy is a necessity for life. That continuous movement of our life force, our chi, our prana, our Reiki, our whatever it is essential to being alive. And so this idea of a chakra being blocked is kind of a misunderstanding, because it's not possible for a chakra to be completely blocked. It can be really, really not flowing. But to have a chakra be completely blocked, it doesn't happen because our energy is constantly flowing. That is in our nature. But on the flip side of that, having perfectly balanced chakras 24/7 is also not possible because we're human. And that energy flow is going to continue through our life circumstances. All of our emotions, all of our thoughts, all of the situations that we experience, all of the relationships that we are in, the status of our home environment, all of these things, and so many more impact the flow of our energy. And so the idea that we should be having perfectly balanced chakras all of the time is actually, I think, a really harmful idea. And the reason I say this is because I remember when I first got my Reiki training, I had gotten my Reiki 2 and I was so excited, and I was doing what every, excited Reiki level 2 does, of like going out and being like, do you want Reiki? Do you want Reiki? Let's do a share. Let's do a trade, just to get the practice. And I did a Reiki session for this woman who was going to do sound healing for me in exchange. And as she was doing the sound healing, she was like taking notes, and we get to the end of the session and she tells me, you'll never be a Reiki practitioner because your chakras are blocked. And I remember at the time, right, because I didn't have the awareness that I have now. I was really new to my spiritual journey. At the time, that felt devastating to have this really prominent Reiki master who, quote unquote, knows what she's doing and knows better than I do and all of these things, tell me that I'm never going to be a good Reiki practitioner because my chakras are imbalanced. And I look back at that now and I'm like, it's such a key indicator of one of the biggest misunderstandings that I think the spiritual community has about the chakras as a whole, which is this thought that even extends into just mass consciousness, that we're supposed to be perfect. This idea that in order to be a good human, in order to be a good Reiki practitioner, in order to be a good enough whatever, we have to be perfect. We can't be angry. We can't be frustrated. We can't be anxious. We can't have blocks. Everything has to be flowing. We have to be perfectly in balance. We can never be impatient. Like there are such high standards that we've set on ourselves that are impossible. They are impossible standards. And I think that's something that I hope this conversation highlights, is this switch of inviting you, like, let's switch that mindset from having a chakra that is imbalanced is a bad thing and a reflection of how you're broken or you're not enough or you're not doing something that you should be doing, to it's an invitation to think, why? What is it about that chakra that needs some attention? What is it about that area of life? We're going to talk about the areas of life more next week and tie this back in. But what is it about that area of life, that emotion, that physical organ that needs my support right now? It's an invitation to become more of yourself instead of less. And I think that's something that is so powerful about looking at the chakras this way, whether we're looking at it from a spiritual perspective or just in general with, this kind of self-worth epidemic that we're having right now of we look at ourselves so often and we say, I would be so much better if I was less anxious, less angry, less afraid, less scared, less talkative, less whatever, right? We want to take these things away from ourselves and say, no, I want to be less than that so that I can be this ideal thing. And when we're looking at the chakras in this way, it's an invitation to become more of yourself. It's not an invitation to say, oh, that anxiety is bad and you shouldn't have it, or, oh, that, chronic lung condition that you have is just because you haven't been taking care of your heart chakra and you should do better. That's not what this is. What it is it's saying your body, your energy, your mind is incredibly intelligent, and it's offering you an opportunity to come back to yourself, to stop denying yourself, to stop trying to be something that you're not, and step into a space of acceptance of saying, you know what? I do have that anxiety. And do you know why I have that anxiety? Let's follow it down the chakras to find the root of that. What is at the root of this physical ailment that I'm having? What's at the root of this anxiety that I'm having? And we can use the chakras to kind of ping pong something. So like Christine's saying, if we're in the throat chakra and we're getting really choked up, or we're having a really hard time speaking our truth, or maybe physically that might interpret as like feeling like you have a ball in your throat, right? We can be like, okay, I'm not speaking my truth. Why? Why am I not speaking my truth? And then it's like, well, I'm afraid that people will judge me and that everybody will leave me. Well, the everybody leaving me is a heart chakra thing because that's community and connection. But the fear of people judging you is actually in solar plexus because that's a self-worth thing. Like I am going to be judged. There's something wrong with me that I'm going to be judged. Okay, why? Why am I worried about being judged? And then it's like, well, there's this fear that I'm not enough. It's like, okay, now we have from I can't speak my truth, this core fear that we found of I'm not enough. And now we can start to come back into that space where we can again become more of ourselves so that we can feel like I am enough. And it's a process, right? This isn't me saying that you can give your chakra a little spin and that's going to go away. But instead of this invitation of saying, well, you should just be able to speak your truth, like, why aren't you doing that? Which I think a lot of practitioners feel of like, I know my throat chakra is imbalanced. Why can't I just fix it? Instead, it becomes this opportunity of awareness of saying you are at your core already enough. Your energy is already flowing. Your inherent natural state is one of balance and fulfillment and expansion. So where are the places and spaces that aren't in that fullest state? And how can we help them to remember their truth, to remember that natural capacity for joy and healing and prosperity that we all have? And so it really is that shift from we're not doomed. We're not victims. We're not stuck in a body that is, going to keep us in patterns of sickness or anxiety or physical ailments or whatever it is. That's not our natural state. Our natural state is one that is flowing and expansive and joyful and connected and aligned. And when we're looking at the chakras in this way, we're opening a roadmap to be able to say, what can we do? What can we tweak to bring you back into that fullness of being that is your birthright?
What I love about this so much is it reminds me of we are all divine. We are all of divine nature. And yet we came in with a pre-plan to wear this human suit, to come into this human experience, to set ourselves up to have these lessons, to contract our chakras, to have the health issues, whatever it may be, because it's part of our learning journey. It's part of our learning journey. And how boring would life be if everyone was in their most expanded state? Like there would be no learning. That would be, that is what afterlife or the in-between space is, right? There's a reason why we come to Earth, and it's so that we can learn these lessons. And if we were always in our most expanded energy state, we wouldn't be able to do so. So I think there's and granted, this is a very crown chakra point of view on this of why are we having the health issue? Why are we having the emotional triggers? Why are we doing this? Yeah, it comes back to that perhaps early childhood trauma, or it comes back to that thing that your parents told you when you were 7 or whatever it may be. And why did that happen? We called it forth, we called it in, we set up these arrangements beforehand. And I really I find that perspective almost comforting. I find it comforting that, of course, my divine natural energy state is the most expansive form available. And that being in this human suit with these electrical impulses that are shining through the chakras and creating these electromagnetic fields and corresponding with one another is all part of being human, right? So to have a practitioner, to have someone of spiritual authority say you can never be because your chakras are out of flow or out of balance or they're blocked is probably my biggest pet peeve in this conversation, because we're all on a healing journey. Every single freaking one of us. There is no point of being here if you are perfect. And it's something that I have to remind myself as well. Like, of course I'm not perfect. Of course we're not perfect. And also, like, there's a bit of like coming in from such a high elevated plane of existence into this 3D reality. It's almost like some of us don't fit in our physical human suit, and we have to contract down to even fit into a body. And so it's all of these different angles that just make me so curious, and that there is a map there. I mean, it's a map that's been given to us that we can follow. So even though we chose to come in with the emotional disturbances, the trauma, the physical health issues, whatever it is, we were also given the map of how to heal it at the exact same time. And so once we start stepping into, okay, I have these health issues and these emotional baggage and limiting beliefs, we can take a pause and going, okay, what am I supposed to learn from this? How do I heal it? What chakra is it related to? And as we do the emotional healing work, we can see our physical reality gets the support that it needs, that we can come into that state of expansion. We can come into health and wellness by taking the roadmap that has been built into our system. And I think that is amazing. I mean, I love the way divine intelligence works. So yes, we have set ourselves up, and we've also given a blueprint, a map of how to find health and wellness. And our job is to pay attention. You know, there's a reason why physical health issues show up. It is your body physically screaming at you to get your attention for an underlying emotional or spiritual issue that has been suppressed, right? So our body is trying to communicate with us. So when we can slow down, I think this is the biggest, hardest part of all of it is, are you willing to slow down, step into the silence, and listen to what your body has to say? Because if we can take that time and go, I'm willing to sit in silence to listen, your body is going to speak to you. Your emotions are going to speak to you. And you can start taking those layers off. That's going to help support you come back into balance.
And, you know, on the flip side of this, because it is such a powerful perspective, right? To understand that these lessons that we're learning, these things that we're experiencing, they have reason and purpose. And a lot of times that can, for some people, feel really overwhelming, right? And bring up that idea of like, well, why would I choose this? Of all things I could have chosen, why this? And, you know, that's an entire different conversation to have, right? But I think what's beautiful about this is that one of the key aspects of our physical human experience is that we have free will, right? Anybody who has engaged with Reiki understands that free will is a key part of this. If someone doesn't want to receive Reiki, they won't receive it no matter how hard you try to give it to them, right? And vice versa. If you don't want to engage with your healing journey, you don't have to. There's no being forced to do things here. And so the reason that free will becomes so key when we're talking about the chakras is that if we have agreed on a soul level to have specific experiences to help teach us lessons, to expand our perspectives, to expand our soul, whatever you want to call it, if we have agreed to these things, right? That means that we're coming to Earth to learn things. And as we all know, learning is uncomfortable because it stretches us. It gets us out of our comfort zone. Whether that learning is a quote unquote smaller lesson or a really, really big traumatic one, right? They're all just expanding us beyond our current perspective and our current level of comfort. And so when we go through that expansion, it's going to be uncomfortable and sometimes it's painful. But we have given ourselves, because we freely chose to come and experience life, we have also given ourselves the tool to be able to freely choose to return to healing and to return to that true high divine self because of the power of free will, right? It wouldn't be as poignant as it is if we didn't have that ability when we're feeling trauma, when we're feeling pain, when we have a physical disease. It wouldn't be as poignant if we didn't have the choice to heal, right? Because, and I think that's something that the chakras can illuminate for a lot of people, is a lot of times we find ourselves feeling like, well, I'm just stuck in this. I have an autoimmune disease and it's incurable. I've had anxiety all my life and there's nothing I can do about it. I had a really terrible childhood and it's impacted the way that my brain formed, and so I'm just stuck like this. Like, we all have on some level differing intensities of that story that we tell ourselves, that, well, I'm just stuck like this. I'm just broken. I'm just whatever it is, right? And first of all, that story is valid. We can be stuck. We can be broken. We can be incurable because we have the free will to choose to be so.
Mhm.
Meaning that we can choose to stay in that victimhood story and we can choose to, right? Let's walk it back through those three layers. We can choose to limit our energy by believing that we're stuck, believing that we're victim, believing that we're whatever, right? And this is not me blaming, right? This is natural human instinct. When you go through something hard, when you go through something that challenges you, it is natural to feel broken. That's not a judgment. That's just a natural human emotion, a feeling like, this is it. I'm done. I'm stuck here. But there comes a point, and maybe that's why you're listening to this podcast. Maybe that's when you start going to therapy. There comes a point in that pain where there's that little thought of, I wish things could be different. Like, what if I could just hop out of this feeling? And at that point, that's when it becomes a choice to stay in those cycles, to stay in the anxiety, to stay in the illness, to stay in the things. And because we have free will, and that free will goes through everything, that means that our higher self, in all of its infinite wisdom, has given us the tool and the blueprint to make better choices, to live a more expanded life, to step out of that narrative and step into one where we are healed and whole and enough and stable and secure and joyful and whatever it is through the chakras. And so that's something where, this is how my journey started with spirituality and with the chakras. Is I had so many things. My adrenals were failing, my thyroid stopped working, I had PCOS, they wanted to diagnose me with Hashimoto's. I had broken my foot in 10 places because I had such intense vitamin deficiencies, because I had holes in my gut. So I wasn't absorbing any of my food, and my vitamin D was non-existent, and my hormones were all over the place. And they were things where I had many, many doctors tell me, there's nothing you can do. You can manage it, but there's nothing you can do. And after, 7 years of being in that cycle of thought of, this is it, my body's just broken, I'm just going to be anxious my entire life, I had that moment of, there has to be something else I can do. Right. And I think we all know that moment, no matter what level it's on. We all know that moment. And that's when I started looking into traditional Chinese medicine and the meridians and its connection to your nervous system, and how childhood trauma impacts the way that your brain develops, which impacts your hormones, which impacts your HPA axis, which is connected to your thyroid and your adrenals and all of these things. And suddenly I was like, it's been in front of me the whole time. And I just couldn't see it because I didn't have the tools. I didn't have the ability to understand that my adrenals are connected to fear, and constantly in a fear state because of my childhood trauma that I haven't dealt with yet. And so it was this revolutionary moment of going from doctors, these like really esteemed high up people, telling me that you're stuck, and believing that story, that I'm stuck, I'm broken, I'm never going to be healed, and I'm just going to be miserable, to no, there is another way. There is this entirely different perspective that connects all of the dots in a way that I haven't been able to up to this point. And that shows me that, here's this physical ailment that you're having. Here's the emotions that go with it. And here's the reason for that. Again, carrying it down through the chakras back to that root cause of here's this trauma, here's this limiting belief that we haven't dealt with yet. What happens if we do that? And through that process, my organs work fine. I don't take any medicines. It was so funny. I was cleaning out my closet yesterday and I found a card that was the schedule of pills that I had to take every day. And halfway through my period of being sick, I was taking about 68 pills a day. Like an insane amount just to get my body to function and truly believing that that was the only option. And now on the other side, having been able to switch that perspective to say, what if there was a different way? What if looking at this roadmap that Christine and I are talking about, there is this potential to choose differently, to understand differently, to look at these signs and symptoms that I'm having physically as an opportunity to retune myself energetically, to heal those things that are causing those weaknesses in my energy field. And when I did that, I don't take any pills. I have had normal blood work for the last 5 years. None of my organs are misfunctioning at all. My hormones are completely balanced. And it's not me saying like, oh, look what I did. It's me saying, look at what we can all do. Because I'm no different than anybody else. Anybody else. Everybody can do this. And it's because we and the divine, in its infinite wisdom, knew that we would need the free will to be able to choose, and that free will goes through all things. And so we can choose to be stuck and to have our energy imbalance and to feel like the chakras are just these energy centers that get imbalanced sometimes. And if they're imbalanced, then we're not good enough. We can choose to believe that, and that's okay because we have the free will and we're allowed to make that choice. But we can also choose to see the potential, to see the blueprint, to start to interact with all the different layers of our well-being in a really powerful way so that we know that we can come into a space where I am healing, I am healed, I am enough, I am the own answer to my suffering through the chakras. I am the answer to the questions that I've been asking if I'm willing to look in the right way.
Yeah. And I feel like I wish that the medical community would catch up. Like, I think there's going to be a shift in the next 20, 30, 40 years of bringing in light energy, of bringing in this, the age of Aquarius is upon us, where, we're moving from the age of like liquid medicine into the age of light medicine. And I feel like there's so much power that is given to the medical community that then as patients, we just adhere to and accept the identity that they're offering it alone. Right. And when we start second guessing what the medical community and the power that they have and start making free will choices that are going to benefit us in a more expansive way, I know personally that was huge. That was huge. That was huge for me as well. So you've heard Isabel's story. And I mean, it wasn't that long ago that I was sitting in my car and be like, do I hire this functional medicine coach, or do I go back up to the emergency room to get another procedure that's going to be a temporary fix? And I feel like we have these experiences, especially as light workers, so that we can know the path forward so we can help others do the same. And it all comes back to claiming our power, our personal power back, to not give it to authority figures, not give it to other people, to say, this is who I am and I get to choose who I am. No one gets to choose that for me. A doctor doesn't get to say that I'm broken and then I am. And it's what notice when we do that, that's when we're at our sickest, because they don't understand it. And the funny thing is I just read some articles on relationships and how heartbreak is tied to heart disease. And I'm like, well, yeah, of course. I'm like, well, no kidding. But now there are doing studies that are showing how these emotions, or feeling like you're in a content, satisfied, relationship with a spouse and what that does for your physical and emotional well-being, right? Like there's all these studies that are coming forward, and it's like, when is the medical model really going to start paying attention that our emotional health and the way we think about ourselves dictates and determines our capacity to heal our physical body. And I just wish I could hit the fast forward button, because even though there's studies on meditation, which then can be related to Reiki, there's still this gap in the medical model to say, well, you're going to need this handful of pills, or you're never going to actually get well because this is just your genetics, or whatever it may be. And it's like, how we have to keep claiming who we are and not allowing others to tell us for us who we are, because we're giving our power away to them. We're literally energetically giving our power away. And so when we can say, I claim my power back from every person, place, or thing, experience, this is who I am, and I claim my divine right to stand in my truth and the wisdom of who I am. And knowing that the journey that we have walked can not only serve us, but serve others. That is the truth. That is the most expansive thing that we can do, is to claim who we are and know that it's our divine birthright to find our path to health and healing. And it's possible.
And in that, looking at how part of the intensity of what this experience is right now is that we are, in general, on that cutting edge of this process. Because if you think about, the generations that have come before us, right? They grew up in war and in the Great Depression and in the era of silence, where mental health was not talked about. Energy was not a thing, right? That idea of magic being evil was still there. It was just now that magic was gun violence and war and famine and all of these things, right? And so when we look at that, we're on this cutting edge of being able to say, let's claim our power, let's stand in our truth, because for so long, that wasn't safe. We weren't safe to be able to do that as a race. And so in that process, knowing that we have the space to give ourselves infinite grace for however long this takes or however uncomfortable it feels, because we really are one of the first generations who have been blessed with the opportunity to be able to walk through this process and to be able to have a space to heal so fully. And this is something that it's a little bit of one of my pokier perspectives, but sometimes I look at the spiritual community and this idea of healing that we have and standing in our power. And I see the narrative that a lot of people get stuck in when they find spirituality and they have their spiritual awakening, and they start going down this rabbit hole of, they find all of the tools and all of the crystals and all of the things. And it's almost this idea of, we're still giving our power away because we're saying, well, this crystal will heal me, or this pendulum will tell me what to do, or not that those things don't have healing power. But what I'm saying is, when we are putting the entirety of our healing power into spiritual tools, as if the sage is going to blow away our limiting beliefs, and the crystal is going to heal our failing adrenals, and the pendulum is going to tell us what choice we should make so that we can be correct in life, we're giving away our power again. And I sometimes I look at that and it makes me so sad for our generation right now, because we have such an opportunity to step into our power, and we have such an opportunity to have conversations like these and to have this open space. And I think it is such a disservice to yourself on an individual level to have this opportunity to reclaim your power, to step into your truth, and to choose not to. And I think that's part of why Christine and I are both so passionate about having these conversations, is because we're doing such a beautiful job as a culture and as, a spiritual community of waking up, of expanding, of bringing this perspective forward. Again, knowing that we're on that cutting edge. And at the same time, let's not do it halfway. Let's not have the awareness and then choose to use that awareness to stay in those cycles and to just give our power to something outside of ourselves because it's more spiritual or divine or higher vibe or whatever it is. The tools that you're using don't matter. And I know I'm going to make some people mad by saying that. And that's not me saying, again, that's not me saying that crystals aren't incredibly healing and that I don't sage every day, right? But the tools that we're using don't matter. What matters is how much we are claiming our power to use those tools, how much we are claiming the ability to heal, how much we are claiming that we're ready to choose differently and step into a new timeline and see the signs and symptoms as opportunities to move forward and expand and reconnect. And bringing again that power from this crystal will heal me to I am open and available to heal. And this is a tool that I'm using in that process. Like you can feel the difference in energy, even just in that. And I think that we're in this space where we need those constant energetic reminders of where are you giving your power away? Because this is such a new process. The ability to claim our power is a really beautiful gift that we're among the first to really be able to claim. And so bringing in that gratitude and awareness is so key. And looking at your chakras are just reminding you, hey, you've given away your power again. Look at this physical ailment. Look at this anxiety. Look at this mental symptom. Look at this energetic fatigue that you're having. Look at whatever it is. Where is it that you're giving your power away? And why? Can you reclaim it? And so, using that example that we had from earlier of that symptom that you have in throat chakra that's actually just a residue from that fear of not being enough. That fear of not being enough means that you've given the power of your own self-worth to other people. Why? Why is the impetus of your self-worth, the main portion of your personal power in how other people perceive you? And in what ways can you start to gently, slowly, again, this isn't going to be an overnight thing, but in what ways can you say, I value myself. I am my own statement of self-worth. I am enough. How can we start to bring that power back in so that we're not falling back into that cycle? And I think it's something that, we can, again, kind of zoom out and take a more crown chakra perspective of saying, like, we owe that to ourselves. We owe that to the generations that came before us who didn't have this opportunity. And like, we owe it to the evolution of humanity to make that choice. Now that we know that we have choice, we have the tools to have the awareness, and we know that we have this blueprint to healing. If we don't choose to take it, that's on us. Like we have this beautiful, amazing opportunity, and what a disservice it would be to ourselves and to humanity as a whole if we chose not to take it,
Yeah. Yeah. No, super powerful words. And to simplify for those who are still confused with the idea of what is power, what is this power free will? Think of it kind of like if we came in with 100% energy and we're at 100%. And then we have something happen in our life that creates a root cause limiting belief that says I'm inherently unworthy of, and I'm unlovable. That brings down your power. I almost feel like I'm seeing it like a video game. Like you have all these different categories of your life source power, and this traumatic event happens, and then some of your life force power goes to that person who called you that name or told you you weren't lovable or that you weren't beautiful or whatever it was. Like they're sapping your energy, they're pulling and you've given your power to them because you believed it, right? Like it's not that they said the thing, it's that you believed it. You still have free will choice to go, I have a choice here to go, well, that's your opinion. I don't really care what you have to say about me. This is who I am, and let it fall away. Or you can be like, yeah, you're right. I'm inherently unlovable. I'm so flawed and broken. Here's my power. Here's my energy. I'm giving it to you because I can't claim it for myself because I'm believing in what you're saying, right? So as children, before we have a conscious filter, this happens all the freaking time. And so we start into our teenage years deficient. We're already suppressed in our energy. Like maybe we're at 50% power, 70% power, 80% power, whatever it is depending on your own childhood trauma. And we all have childhood wounds. So we need to remember that those are the situations that we have set ourselves up for pre-birth so that we have the lessons to work through during our lifetime, right? And so the idea of our power, part of it is intention, and part of it is this unconscious happening of when I allow someone to dictate what I believe, not my true core essence of who I am. When I forget that I am divine, that I am inherently worthy, and then I let other people make decisions and choices on my behalf, that's when I'm literally exchanging something for their validation or their acceptance or whatever it may be in your scenario. And so when we think about this power, sometimes it is an exchange. Sometimes like I'm going back to that prostitute archetype. I'm going to give you this piece of me in exchange for that part of you. You know, there's exchanges happening, whether consciously or unconsciously, as part of our healing journey and lessons. And we all have it. Each and every single one of us has a prostitute archetype in our wheel. We all have a saboteur in our archetypes. Why? Because those are what is set up so that we learn the life lessons, right? So whether the goal, I think, is to come into a position in your life, whenever that is for you. It could be freaking 15 or 20 or 40 or 55 or 75. It doesn't matter. But when we can come to the point of saying, this is who I am, I accept all that I am with all of my past, I forgive myself and others, I release it, I let it go, and I can be here and now in this present moment, knowing my truth, that I'm enough, I am lovable, I am worthy, and this is who I am. Your chakras will start to then be affected because you're no longer playing the exchange game. You're no longer saying, here is my self-worth in exchange for being safe in this relationship or whatever it may be, right? So notice where you are in exchange with someone. And sometimes there's a healthy dependency upon others where it's healthy to lean on one another in relationship if it's reciprocal, if it's done in a way that is truly supportive and loving, versus there's just a downright exchange. I'm going to give you this home in exchange for you to, have sex with me or whatever it is. Like, we need to come to, where am I making excuses and accommodations that I'm actually uncomfortable with in my life? Those are energy drains. So, there's your toxic relationships. There's your home life that might not feel healthy and in balance. And it's all so that you can come to a point of recognizing your self-worth, so that you can remember who you are as divine. And when we can have that emotional undercurrent, then our physical well-being will step up and match it. But oftentimes that the physical conditions that we have arise in our body, it's because the emotional side has spent years trying to get our attention and we've suppressed it. So if you're having physical ailments, it may take years to reverse, and it can be quick. It really depends on how much trauma has been stored in your body. And to recognize then when you start to recognize this, going, I'm feeling triggered, I'm going to pause and take a deep breath, going, okay, I know this is coming from my childhood trauma. I'm not going to give it power because I'm not going to have the same reaction this time. I'm going to choose something different. I'm going to take my consciousness back, because normally we're running 95% on autopilot. We're running off of subconscious. And when we can stop running on autopilot and say, I'm hitting the pause button, I'm taking 5 nice deep breaths, and I'm saying, I'm not going to react the same way I did before. I'm going to choose something different. I'm going to take my free will choice and say, just because someone said that to me does not give me permission to have the same response that inflicts more trauma and more damage to someone else. And so you are containing and having energetic awareness of where your energy is going and what you are accepting from others. So that when you have an insult come at you, you can say, I'm not available for that. That's not going to affect me. And so guess what? When you have that energy expansion going on in your chakras, that's saying, I'm not available for that, no longer does it show up in your experience because you've learned the lesson. That's the coolest thing, is that you stop having these bad experiences when you are not in an energetic match to learn the lesson of it.
And so looking at, all of this, right? This conversation has really been here to help expand our mindsets. And so looking at it and looking at how we can distill this down into, well, where do you start, right? What's that first step? And that first step is recognizing that whether we're calling it power or energy or whatever you want to call it, our chakras are these storage centers for our will, our power, our energy, our spirit, whatever you want to call it. And they give us signs of when we're giving that away consciously, like a toxic relationship, like Christine was saying, or unconsciously, like in the case of childhood trauma. And when we're looking at the chakras in that way, when we're looking at our physical well-being, our mental well-being, our energetic well-being, and we can see those imbalances, instead of choosing to blame ourselves or to say, see, this is just a reason that I'm not good enough, or this is why I'm broken, or whatever it is, look at it as an opportunity, a little signpost to say, hey, you've given your power away. Can you figure out where? Can you figure out why? And are you willing to use your free will to make a different choice? And it's a process, right? This is a step-by-step, moment-by-moment experience. But the goal of this conversation isn't necessarily to give you the key that's going to unlock all of your chakras to be balanced and flowing, right? Hopefully by the end of this conversation, nobody's expecting that to happen, because it's a process and they're here to help us learn and heal. And through that journey, we will expand. And so at the end of this conversation, what we really want you to be walking away with is this understanding that you don't have to be stuck. You don't have to be broken. We have this roadmap to healing. We have this intrinsic messaging system, like an internal GPS built into our physical, energetic, and emotional systems that can allow us to choose differently, to find where we're giving away our power and to take the steps to bring it back. And so that's our invitation for you this week is, can you spend this week noticing? Notice your physical ailments, notice your mental symptoms, notice those places where your energy just feels off, and start thinking, what could that mean, right? If you're having trouble with your throat, how could that be connected to your communication? If you're having trouble with your lungs, how could that be connected to your compassion and your sense of belonging? Start being open to, what could this mean? And where is this indicating that I've given my power away? That's the first step, right? This awareness of, where is my power going? And becoming aware of, am I willing to make a different choice to get it back? And if the answer is no, that's okay. But you probably won't want to come back and listen to this podcast next week, because next week we're going to be going into looking at the different areas of your life and how it's going to be mirroring and mimicking these states of balance or imbalance, flow or not flow. And so spending this week in this state of just awareness, knowing that you might become aware of a whole lot more than you thought you would be, and that's okay, because the more we're aware of, the more we can heal, the more we can choose differently, the more we can exercise that free will and say, I'm not stuck, I'm not broken, I'm just remembering that I'm healed, I'm remembering that I'm enough, I'm remembering that I am whole and already there. And so spend this week in awareness. Keep a journal. Where are you giving your power away? And start noticing which one comes up more often than the others. Is there a person that you give your power away to most? Is there a memory that you give it away to most? Is there a limiting belief that you give it away to most? And bring that awareness with you as we step into next week's conversation. And we're going to start building on this to help you through this process of expanding and healing and choosing differently. But it starts with being willing to do the work. And that starts with opening your awareness and choosing that you're ready, willing, and able to choose differently, to heal. And so that's our invitation for you, of staying in that awareness, knowing that it's possible. And then we'll continue this journey one step at a time. And so, as always, thank you for listening. We hope to see you next week. And until next time, may you awaken to the whispers of wisdom rising from within. And with